Right, welcome back to a very cold and blustery Oxfordshire. Now, the last time we filmed here in the summer, we said at the end that we might come back and have another little go in the depths of winter. So, Cav, do you reckon that this time we've bitten off a little bit more than we can chew?
I think that was probably the most stupidest thing that you could have said. I think you got far too excited based on the success of the first one. But we're here. It's not, the weather isn't that bad. It'll be what it will be.
It's not that bad. I think it's about 4 degrees today, and the water temperature is also 4 degrees, and the lake hasn't produced a carp for a month.
Like I say, it's not that bad. It could be worse. It could be worse. We could be back in lockdown and not be allowed to be here. So
yeah, this is
we're
true.
here.
So we're going to give it a go. We've got 48 hours. We've got some very blustery weather coming in, and I happen to know that the chance of a bite here often happens in the afternoon. So we've already got the rods flicked out. We're going to have a go for the first day, and we're going to have an honest go at catching a proper winter carp. I'm pretty sure that we'll show you some of our baits and techniques as well, and yeah, just going to see how it goes.
It's nice, mate. It's nice being out with you again. I think this trip, like I say, maybe we can have a little catch up about how the year's gone for us both, see some of our captures, and yeah, hopefully, fingers crossed, we'll get paid off with some nice fish this trip. It's going to be tough, mate.
One bite is all we need, isn't it?
Let's
be honest, one bite, a winter carp, that's all we can pray for, isn't it?
We're here, we're doing it.
Let's give it a go, see how it happens.
So we're back at the secret lake. Like me and Gavin said, this is going to be tricky. It's been a long time since anyone's caught from here, so we really are up against it. And it is the polar opposite to how you guys and girls saw it in the summer. That thick weed that was touching the surface throughout most of the lake, that's all gone now. Then first 5 frosts of the year put paid to that. It is just not there. That lake bed is barren. It's completely different. You know, when you saw the drone footage last year and how we were fishing and our approach, my approach certainly was a lot of bait, very close in those holes in the weed, and letting them fish drift over, which is how I got the biggest resident in the lake and managed to nick that one out. Is it going to happen this time? It's going to be hard. Okay, we've obviously had to change our tactics and our approach, not only because it's winter, but also of how difficult it's fishing. I'm not really that shy with introducing bait throughout the year if it feels right and if the fish are responding. But for the last build up to this trip, and this has been getting fished by some really good anglers, not much has happened. I don't think it's done a bite now for over 2.5 weeks. So again, to try to nick one is going to be tough. So completely change of approach, completely different. Remember in the summer, those fish were really close in, they were in that weed, visiting them holes in those channels, and we were getting bites that way. That weed isn't there anymore now. So from the margin all the way up to the far bank is it's just a moon landscape. There's nothing there. The fish are spending a lot of time now on the remains on those far bank snags. There's still a few trees that are overhanging, and again, that's a no fishing bank. We've been round there this morning, we've shimmied up some trees, and just as we expected, we have seen them there. They are making their way through beneath that old, now barren canopy, but they are there, so we're close to them. What we now need to try to do is 1, present, and 2, just try to nick that bite. So what have we done? Very different to our fish last year, which was over a lot of bait in those holes. This trip, it's 3 solid bags, clipped tight to those branches, super tight. gone round, shimmied up the trees, had a look down. Once that wind dies, we can see how we're presenting, and again we can see the fish are close. They're not doing much, they're looking really lethargic, but we are close to them. I've got 3 rods in a good area, in a good zone that has got winds of form. So yeah, little solid bags on my approach with the slicker pellets, along with some Nutriplex crumb that I have soaked in Minamino last night. Blitzed down into that fine crumb, then just a little dousing of the Minamino just to try to get it working for me. And again, 3 or 4, 5 grains of corn over each rod. Not a lot of bait by any stretch, just enough to nick that bite. And again, that Minamino and that Nutriplex crumb, it's going to be working really, really hard for me, but without actually giving any food that's going to fill them up. It'll pass through the gut really, really quickly, but all the while it's giving off a lot of attraction. And when these carp are in this winterized state, when their metabolic rate's really, really low, when their eyesight's poor, when basically they're not functioning like they do in the summer, that extra smell, the visibility of the fluoro bait, that's really going to sort of hopefully spark a reaction. They're going to see it easier. Their eyesight's really bad at the minute, so we're going to utilise them bright hook baits and a good aroma of a solid food bait, although nothing that's going to fill them up, to try to make them feed.
So the question that I get asked the most this time of the year is, what bait should I be using, and are there any tips or edges that I should be using in my own fishing to help get a few more bites now that the water is pretty cold? So all through the summer, the word on everyone's lips has been the herb. Now the herb is a red fish meal, and it's very, very heavy in hydro liquids, and I don't think I've ever made anything that's been so instant and so well received. And interestingly, this summer, the hook bait that really caught the majority of the carp for the whole of the Handcraft team was a matching food wafter. Now, in years gone past, we'd have been using bright pop-ups and all sorts of different hook baits, but this year for sure, those matching wafters that look just like a normal boilie have been the best thing to put on the end of your rig. Now, this year's been a funny year for lots of reasons, but I'm pretty sure that a lot of people have been using particles. And the one thing, again, we've noticed as a group is on the waters where a lot of particles were going in, the boilies were really effective. Fast forward to now, and we're in December, you've really got to change your approach, really. I'm not saying change dramatically, but you definitely need to change your approach. So I'm going to give you a bit of a rundown of some of the things and the ingredients that I use once we get sort of into December and the water is slipping below sort of 7 degrees Celsius. Now, the first one that I rate really highly is a very, very simple product, and it's a low oil carp pellet. Carp pellets have been designed by people that are far cleverer than I'll ever be to feed carp all throughout the year. And by feeding my own carp here at this lake, we soon realised that the carp really like them, and they can literally eat them throughout the whole 12 months of the year. Now, you can't just put out a bulk standard carp pellet, can you? Because that'd be boring. So what we do is we use a whole blend of different liquids and hydro liquids, and I rate 1 or 2 of them massively. Now, the first one is quite a new product, and it's Calanus. It's been around for a couple of years, and Calanus is quite a thin hydro liquid, and it goes into pellets really, really well. So a very, very simple mixture of low oil carp pellets blended with these liquids. It's minimal feed, maximum attraction. That's a big thing in the winter. So that is definitely one of the things that I would recommend you to try at some point soon. There are various hydro liquids. That liquid liver is very good. The hydro shrimp is very good, but Calanus is that little bit thinner, and it seems to work when the water is cold. Now, different hook baits. Now, I said in the first film that the Sting was my absolute favourite, and that hasn't changed. It's still catching loads of fish now, and it's definitely going to be on my rods during this session. We've sold absolutely loads of those Sting hook baits this year. It's been an absolute game changer for certain people. But this time of year, when you're looking for maximum attraction, minimum feed, the bright ones really do seem to come into their own. So that's something that's well worth a try. Now, as Cav has probably said at some point in the past, a lot of us at the team swap back to using Nutriplex boilies in the winter. Why do we all make that change? Well, it's dead simple really. That bait has been around for quite a few years. It's a lovely blend of fish meals to milks to bird food, and for whatever reason it doesn't seem to fill the fish up. So you can continue to use it all the way through the winter, knowing that they're not going to be plugged up with sort of heavy fish oils and stuff. And again, I do like that bait in the winter. My bulk standard mix is low oil carp pellets mixed with the liquids, some of that Nutriplex crumb, and then I chop and change between all the different hook baits. Like I said, at the moment, the matching wafters have been very good. We're swapping back to the bright ones now. And it's something you should definitely think about in your own fishing. There is, as I said in the first film, there is no hook bait that suits everybody, and you can use it all through the whole year. You do have to chop and change. But the main point about your bait in the winter is it must be digestible. The days of old of using the red fish meals with the heavy oils, they're just not the way to go. We know that. I feed these fish here once every couple of weeks. I can tell what they do and don't eat. And the one thing about that Nutriplex is I can always put it in here. The carp always drop down and feed. And then the next day, if I go back and repeat the process, they're there looking for more. So think very carefully about what baits you're going to use. Make sure it's soluble, make sure it's digestible, and play around with those hook baits. That can be the difference between catching in the winter or catching diddly squat. And you can probably see that the sun is dipping behind us. It's really cold now. I think we're going to light the fire and sit around and probably have a Chinese takeaway and chill out for a few hours. This is the time on this lake to get a bite. So we're going to huddle up next to the rods and see what happens in the next 15 or 20 minutes.
Well, I don't think I've ever been so pleased to see such a small little carp. Last night was one of the most brutal, cold, wet nights we've had for a long time. And at the beginning of this, we were pretty sure we were going to struggle. And yesterday, it was looking like a blankety blank could be on the cards. So just before first light this morning, I got a few bleeps on the little sting pop-up. And I don't know who's more shocked, me or the fish, but this is definitely like holding a block of ice. But he's a beautiful little carp. It's saved a blank. We've caught it in the depths of winter and from a lake that hasn't produced a carp for over a month. So it just shows you that it can be done. You just got to stick to it and have a little bit of faith, which I'd pretty much lost yesterday. There's still a few hours to go. We've got one more night to go through. Let's try and catch one a little bit bigger. But either way, he is a beautiful little carp. Thank you very much.
Okay then, so what I want to talk about now are some of the products within Handcraft's range that I've been using a lot this year. And those predominantly have been the specialist hook baits that we make. In the spring, I really like my baits to be really bright. You know, the carp sensors are really poor, their eyesight's terrible. So I'm going to use that to my advantage, okay? Now, for the most part, ordinarily I'd be popping out bright single pop-ups on my chosen water. And for the most part, I still would do that. However, the water that I've been fishing this year, a lot of it has been at range. Okay, there's a lot of range work involved. So there is that chance, certainly with some pop-up rigs, when you're casting 110, 130, in some cases 140 yards, I can't afford to have that rig tangling. And sometimes even the most well-built pop-up rig can tangle. So that's where Handcraft come in. What Gavin's managed to create is some wonderful wafters that are really, really bright. They're a food-based bait. They give us lots of attention, a lot of attraction, but more importantly, you've got that visual aspect now. And again, in that spring, in those late March, April, May, they really came into their own, and I caught a lot of fish on those. That transition through the year, so obviously the start of spring was all about them bright hook baits, and to be fair, I think I caught quite a few in the summer as well, with those bright hook baits over my normal bait, over the herb. Like the baits like the Sting and the Eton Mess, they worked really, really well. As we moved into the later months though, come sort of the September, the October, those fish had been absolutely hammered on them bright baits, and it was noticeable looking at other people's captures that were still on those bright baits that the results started to slow. And I think that's quite common now. You know, them bright hook baits do have their time and they do have their place, certainly in the spring, for nicking those real quick bites. And a bright bait will always get a bite over food source. That's a given. However, it was so noticeable that the bites had dropped. So what did I do? I did what I think most carp anglers would do, and then that was to change to the match the hatch. And again, at Handcraft, we were really lucky with the herb. There's the matched hatch wafters, but what I was doing particularly well on was the larger hook baits. Okay, and now these are just the hardened hookers. Now, part of big carp fishing is once I've got my location right and I know my area, I know the spot's presentable, but more importantly, I know that the carp are there. What I don't want to be doing is to be reeling in every 6 hours, 12 hours, or worrying about a pop-up losing its buoyancy, or have the small fish got involved and snarled my rig up. So again, here's the rig that I've been using, and you can see there attached to my rig is the hardened hook bait. Now the beauty of these hardened hook baits is I got no qualms, no issues, no problems with leaving that in the lake for the whole 48 hours of my session. You know, if I've hit the clip right, if I've felt the lead down, and if I know what I'm presenting over, then I've got no real reason to reel this in. That can sit there until the bite comes. And the beauty of these is they will withstand the nuisance attention from roach, from the rudd. They'll sit there and sit you quite happily without being bored down. I've had great success with these that we'll maybe see some photos later, but these are great little hook baits. You can see there that the rig that I've been combining this with, it's a 50-pound snag leader, reasonably stiff, and even with this hardened hook bait, it's not a wafter, it's not going to gently lower down, it's stiff enough to kick that away still in a real quick and timely manner, but guaranteeing that I'm presenting. So yeah, for the later part of the year when it was time to match the hatch, that's when these hardened hook baits really did come into their own. So it's really important to remember that there's not one colour or one hook bait choice for every occasion. And the good thing about Handcraft is they've got pretty much every occasion covered. So whether it's whacking single bright ones in the spring to showing fish, or trying to be subtler and presenting match the hatch hook baits really low to the deck when they're really in that feeding mood, every box is covered. So don't be afraid to experiment. Have a look at the range. Somewhere in the range there's going to be a hook bait that you love. My top three personally is the Sting in the pop-up form or the wafter form, the 2Ts, or if I'm matching my hatch, it's the herb hard hook baits.
had some nice fish this year then, mate, didn't you? It's pretty, looking back through some of them photographs.
Yeah, it's been pretty kind, buddy. Yeah, it's been very kind. It's a good year.
Looks like in April and May you had some real nice fish out of here. That was about the time when we were just putting the final touches to the herb, wasn't it?
Yeah, I think by then, I think that was the second or third batch you gave me to try. And yeah, I'd started catching from memory in April, I had a couple of 30s out and it was really cold. We'd not long come out of lockdown.
That's right, and April was cold this year,
It was
wasn't it?
freezing, yeah, Baltic all the time. Them sessions there were really cold. But yeah, I think that trip there that you're talking about, sort of the build up to it, again, that was here. We had what is usually crystal clear water. Suddenly, do you remember we had all that rain? And suddenly it went a real brown, murky colour. And it just changed the fishing, didn't it? We had all that thick Canadian really early.
That's right, yeah.
And mate, I was catching some absolute worldies close in the weed over a lot of the herbs.
I've got a real nice photograph of that that nice linear you had out of it. It was mid-30, I think it was, wasn't it?
Yes.
Up in the shallows.
That's correct, buddy. Yeah, again, it's like 2-3 rod lengths out. I can remember it just seeing this in the murk. You could see the weed, but then within that murk, you can see real dark areas, and it's like you look at it and you think it's just weed because again the water was so murky. And it was only by flicking a little lead out. Everywhere else in and amongst the dirt, you wouldn't get a drop, and you're ripping Canadian. But then there's a hole pull the size of this boat where it just looked darker, and you flick a lead and you get excited because it kept going down and donk. It's like, wow, okay, it's in the clip, feeling all around it. It's like, yeah, that's an actual proper hole, and it's, instead of it being sort of 70 yards there, it's 10 yards, it's there, it's almost underarm, and even better than that, you get up a tree, and even in the murk, you can see these dark shapes gliding over the Canadian, and through it, it's like, oh, this is absolute game on. I remember that trip, the wind was gently trickling down there, and when I climbed the tree for the first time, because I was actually at the top end, I'd seen a couple of fish really early on into that day, and I was plotted up there in the lake, and I remember there not being able to find any real good spots. I had a bite real quick, a real small one, and then from then on, it was like, I'm not presenting, something wasn't right. I reeled in, had a brew with the guy that was fishing this swim now. Again, went out down that fire and shimmied up another tree, and it was just blackness, there was carp everywhere. You could see them just gliding over that hole real close in. And it was a relatively easy fishing. If you're stealthy with it and clever, you know, it was catapulting and then waiting for the coast to be clear, shimmying down, little solid bag, underarmed, lowered onto the spot, and it was just waiting for the numbers.
They loved the bait, didn't they? Back in the spring, that was, I remember you started stepping up the bait, didn't you? And I was a bit surprised at how much you was putting in shallow water. But it worked, didn't it?
It went against everything that you'd sort of think about spring fishing, and then bright singles where...
Did it work?
Oh mate, they were soon left behind. As soon as it was so noticeable that they wanted bait, it was like you could not give them enough, and it's a bit cliche, genuinely, the more I put in, the more bites I got. And that was just one session. I think I had 2 30s that trip. In the build up to that, I was nicking bites. Then following on from that, I was here, I think maybe the week after. I had another 3 30s in an afternoon, then back again. I just couldn't put foot wrong. Yeah, it was so lucky that spring, so lucky.
Yeah, it was a good spring.
But you had a mad one as well, didn't you? I remember that big apple slice scaly thing that you caught. That was a mega one. Was it floppy? I think it was floppy. Yeah.
Yeah. So I was a bit this year. You know, my fishing was a little bit sporadic because obviously we were full speed ahead at Handcraft. But yeah, I always wanted to catch that floppy tail. I've read the books, I've seen it, and it was still in there.
Yeah.
And yeah, I had a real good hit of fish. I think that was towards the end of May. I got roped into the last swim available. It was a Thursday. I was a bit despondent because it was so busy, and ended up in this swim. Just happened to be the bonanza of a swim where they wanted to be in a slightly bit deeper water.
So had you spotted them before anyone else, or?
I think it was a case of everyone else had turned up, made loads of noise. Yep. That last little deep pool was where they were going to end up. So I plotted up in there and the weather was bang on. And first time I decided to give them a little bit of bait actually, because I was still sort of, you know, treading carefully. And I just couldn't put a foot wrong that weekend. It was one of those prime weekends where they were up for it. I was bang in the right place. The weather was spot on. There were some big winds. And yeah, I caught floppy tail. She was a absolute stunner. She's, you know, she's an old fish now. She's starting to look a bit tired, but
yeah.
It was the one I wanted. I had a brace of 40s that session, the 2 big mirrors that are in there. And yeah, both came over a lot of bait. Bright hook baits, really odd. That is a venue where bright hook baits are real, they're king.
Yeah.
and they still seem to be producing on the bright hook baits. Did slow up a little bit in the summer.
Yeah.
But they are pretty fish.
You finished off though the year with a massive high very early, didn't you? You had your winter campaign already pre-planned, and I know you love your winter fishing, and it could be argued there probably ain't a better winter angler that I know other than yourself, but you'd already had a winter target in mind, but I think you sort of ruined Little Pete soon, didn't you? What happened there?
That fish, the long common that's in there, had gone all year without being caught. I even heard a few people say that perhaps it's not in there anymore, maybe it's dead. And I'd seen a few photographs of it. And I thought when Handcraft slows down, we'll go back and we'll have a proper go for it. So I'd done a bit of recce work in the summer. Went back, when was it? Late October. And yeah, got a swim. It was quite busy. Picked a swim to one side, 2 over bait, 1 to the side over very little bait with a herb wafter on. And I almost talked that fish into the net. I tell a few people, I'm after this one. Following morning, had a real slow stuttery take.
Yeah.
Fish came in like a wet lettuce. When you catch a big fish, you want it to be an epic fight that goes on for hours. You have to get out in the boat to get it. This one came in like a wet lettuce. But when I saw it swirling around in the margins, I went to poke it with that landing net and realised it didn't quite fit in the landing net. I knew which one it was. Yeah. So yeah, I'll take that all day long. A cracking end to a year. It's been a good year for a lot of us, but that was like the ice on the cake for me.
There's been some big fish caught, hasn't there, by the team members?
It's been ridiculous. I don't think I've ever worked with any sort of firm where the catch ports have been piling in so quick.
Yeah.
And from so many different venues around the UK, it's been a phenomenal year.
Lots and lots of PBs.
Just what's going to happen next?
Well, you got the nut baits to be released soon, which I've tasted and I've seen, and
it's going to be a big thing. I think
that's a little bit special, I think.
Yeah, and hopefully a few more winter captures, and before we know it, it'll be next year and time to go again.
Game
How many
on.
days?
Bring on spring.
So we've come to the end of another session, and let's be honest, Cav, it's been pretty brutal, hasn't it, mate?
I think just by looking at it, you can see we've aged over the last 2 days, something terribly. Yeah, it's been tough. And it was always going to be a big ask, wasn't it?
Yeah, but I think it's a good representation of a winter session, isn't it? It's this lake hadn't produced a single carp for over a month. I think the water temperature, we said it was 4 degrees, didn't we? Mm-hmm. So that's pretty much as cold as it can be without it being solid, isn't it? So if you can catch a fish in 4 degrees Celsius, then you guys can definitely catch fish wherever you guys are fishing. So no, it's been real tough, but we did manage to catch one. And I think, as the year comes to a close, it's been a very interesting year for Handcraft, hasn't it?
I think looking at the guys in your team, just what they've caught consistently throughout the year speaks volumes of the quality of the bait and the belief in the bait that we have, and obviously that you've managed to get through the rollers has been second to none.
Yeah, it's been a very busy year, and I'm really excited about what's coming in 2022. So just like to say a big thank you to everyone that's been involved, and all of the lads and all of the customers, and all of the emails, all the messages you guys give. I sit and read all of them, and I respond to every single one. So please keep them coming. And we look forward to seeing you at some point in the new year.
Be lucky.